All right, great. Good morning. Really great to have you here. Really glad to have you here. Welcome to the interview series from Inspira Counseling Services called Shift Happens. We are very glad to start this off with our first episode with Swati Khanolkar, the founder of InVivo. Now, before we start, I would like to mention a few things. One, we would like you and we would encourage you to keep your videos off during the interview, since that might help us run this more smoothly. If you have any questions, we will definitely be having a Q&A session at the end of the session, at the end of the interview. In the meantime, if you have any question, any suggestions, you can write them in the chat box. One more thing that we want to mention is at the end of the interview, you will be receiving a feedback form, which we would like you to fill in and give us your suggestions for the today's episode. We would also be sending you few details about today's, the discussion that we are having. So definitely you would have a record of that. Um, just give me a second. Right. Okay. Great. I'm really glad that the first episode is with Swati ma'am. And just to introduce her firstly, she is founder of InVivo Mumbai Center for REBT and Center for Psychosession Therapy, co-founder of that with Professor Dryden. She started her practice in 2005, so long career, right? And she has also founded InVivo in 2007. InVivo has been involved in conducting individual psychotherapy, group sessions, couple sessions, as well as dissemination of REBT. And over these 20 years span, ma'am has been taking lectures and teaching REBT in various organizations, institutes, colleges, and therefore we thought that the first session can be with her so that we get some insight into how she has, been in her career as a psychotherapist and also about REBT opportunities that are out there. Right? So welcome, ma'am, and thank you for being here. It's a great honor.
Thank you, Trupti, and thank you to your entire team for inviting me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. All right, so then let's start. Since I'm talking about the expanse of your career, ma'am, right now, I am really interested in doing this. What were your what were the milestones or the key points that you remember as a psychologist for yourself? Yes.
Well, I'd say to begin with, of course, my introduction to REBT, right? Because that changed everything for me. And it was pretty early in my career, thankfully for me, immediately after I'd finished my post graduation. But that's definitely a milestone that when I learned about it, I realized that there was an effective therapy like REBT that I could practice, and that the fact that I was being taught by stalwarts in the field. So my first teacher was Mr. Kishore Phadke, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he was the first fellow and supervisor in the whole of Asia in REBT of the Albert Ellis Institute. So, I mean, I think now that I'm thinking about it, every time that I have met these people, stalwarts, who've been my teachers, who've been my mentors, who've taught me, beginning with Phadke sir, but then eventually when I went to the Albert Ellis Institute, and my teachers at the Albert Ellis Institute, and of course Professor Wendy Dryden, whom I consider a personal mentor, and I continue to learn from him. So I think these teachings from these stalwarts have been the main milestones. And I think that's how my career has progressed. Every time that I have upgraded my learning, every time that I've learned from a new teacher, they've all been major milestones for me. And then, of course, that we started partnering with the Albert Ellis Institute. And since 2017, we've been able to bring that caliber, that quality of training to India by conducting their international trainings in India. So that was another point of satisfaction for me, I'd say, in my career.
And I'm glad that you pointed that out because I think I forgot to mention you are a certified trainer and supervisor for the Albert Ellis Institute. And I finished my training with you in 2017, and I clearly remember I think you have been instrumental in bringing the training over here. That has helped a lot of the students and a lot of professionals, and for me for that matter, in learning it and then going forward with it. So really great. And thank you for doing that. That really helped us as well.
My pleasure.
I'm a little curious. How did you come with the title for the organization, which is INPI? What were your thoughts behind that?
Well, I think when I decided that I was going to start a center, I knew that I was a practicing psychologist who only practiced REBT. So the center had to reflect REBT philosophy in its name as well. That was my
Right.
primary. And then,
Right.
for those of us here who are familiar with it, would know that it is very rooted in reality, right? And that we work to help people not sort of look for an escape from reality, but to face it along with the adversities in it and kind of come to terms with it. So then, in vivo is a Latin word that means in real life, right? It literally means that. And I thought it reflected this philosophy very well, that that we were going to find a way to not disconnect from reality no matter how hard it is, and to stay sort of grounded in it and still find ways to cope with it. And at
Hmm.
a level that reflected the REBT philosophy well, that's how the name. And I think we are familiar with this, assuming people in this group also from what we know as the in vivo desensitization techniques that Joseph
Yes.
Wool
Yes.
made
Yeah.
very famous.
Right.
So again, the word is used in that context even over there, right? That we are desensitizing, we're helping people deal with their anxiety in real
Hmm.
life, in
Yes.
I mean
Yes.
face to face with reality. So
Correct.
that's where the name came from.
Right. Great. And that's a very interesting way,
Yeah.
I would say. Now, I've had the opportunity to observe you and learn from you as a trainer, and I've also observed you as a therapist. And I have seen the difference between when you are a trainer and when you are a therapist, right? And I always wonder to myself is how do you maintain that balance between being the teacher or the trainer side and Swati as the therapist, right? Are there any, would you follow or are you mindful about something? Really curious about that.
Yeah. I'm glad you're asking this question firstly, Trupti, because I feel like so it gave me a chance also to think about it. And I'd like to answer it. But before I answer it, what I'm saying is I think all of us who are practicing psychotherapists can aspire to also be trainers or speakers. You know what I mean? Certified trainers. Even if not certified trainers, I know that many of these young psychotherapists are conducting workshops. So that is a different role than that of a therapist.
Mm.
And most of us can aspire to have both of these roles as psychologists. So I think this is an interesting question that I'm hoping that there can be some takeaway for the group here. Well, I feel that as a trainer, being a therapist is very, very helpful. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that trainers can only be effective if they're also practicing therapists,
I
right?
agree.
So just academic trainers are going to have limitations. Because
Hmm.
trainer, I find that the fact that I'm a therapist is very helpful because I'm able to bring a lot of cases during the training of clients that I'm seeing in the present. A lot of questions that students bring, I'm able to answer, give them very practical answers which are based on my experience of work and not just textbook answers, right?
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
helpful. Also, during training, we do something called peer counseling, as you're very well aware, which means the trainees are also presenting their own problems.
Hmm.
And as a supervisor, not only am I helping the therapist who's practicing, but I'm
Mhm.
also helping the student who's presenting her own problem, who's being the client. So again, there, being a therapist is very, very helpful. So I'd say that as a trainer, being a therapist has helped me a lot.
Hmm.
Other way around is slightly tricky. I found that sometimes while practicing therapy,
Mhm.
uh, therapists can bring on the role of a trainer a bit too
Yes.
much.
Yes.
In therapy, you're not sitting there to teach and preach.
Hmm.
I mean,
Right.
as much as we are sort of bringing a lot of new learning to the table, but
Hmm.
the role and the interaction and the relationship is significantly different than a trainer and a trainee. So if it becomes
Hmm.
overly didactic and if you're being in a trainer mode too much, I don't
Yeah.
know if your experience as well. I think all of us who also
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
struggle a little
Yes.
with that. So then I think it's important as a therapist to be very mindful that you don't bring in the role of a trainer there. That you're not a trainer. The relationship is different. It's more complex between a client and a therapist. And I mean, you got to meet them at their. It can't be a
Hmm.
superior. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Correct. Yeah.
so that striking that balance. It's ongoing work, I suppose, with experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Be getting better at it. But I'm very mindful of it when I'm doing therapy.
That I'm glad that you brought it up. I
Yeah,
think two things that I want to highlight from what you said. I agree with you that that is the reason why I'm asking this question, because since I teach at colleges as a visiting faculty, it
yeah,
is difficult for me to keep the trainer role or the teacher or an educator role, uh, from the counseling sessions. And a lot of the time, that shift happens in the relationship, as you said, that if at
correct.
times you're more teaching or educating them rather than actually being the therapist. Because as you said, I think the skill sets and what your relationship or dynamics are in the counseling sessions are way different than when you're an educator and a learner, right?
Sure,
Definitely. And
sure.
one more thing that I want to highlight is that I think you have brought in a point which is very interesting. I think very few trainers do that, or very few psychologists do that. Is the encouragement that saying that any therapist can
Yeah,
become an educator or a trainer? So this
yeah,
part I think is great that you're encouraging also other professional psychologists to kind of also learn how to know your concepts and, also be able to explain to somebody else as well, if not kind of completely going to train. Of course, we agree, I think we will agree on this, that when you start training, then you need the proper certification and qualification
for sure.
for doing so, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that
So
encouragement really helps.
I'm going to just sort of take that point a little bit forward because you're right that just because we're good therapists, we cannot take it for granted that we're going to be good trainers. That's not enough.
Yes,
It's
yes.
important to get yourself some sort of learning, if possible, a certification as a trainer.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
all of us should aspire towards that because if you're going to have a full-fledged career as a psychologist,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
why should we limit ourselves to only practicing therapy when there is so much more that can be done and so
Right.
much more that can be done on group level? You know what I mean? We can
Hmm.
easily
Hmm.
do that. And there is a lot of scope because I mean there are all kinds of people can benefit from this, right? Our clientele is really very broad.
Right.
So I'm definitely encouraging people to do that,
Hmm.
to do it with, studying and learning and proper training that they
Right.
can then become facilitators and trainers for sure.
True, true. Yes, definitely. And I think we're all for dissemination of REBT in the general population as well as within the psychology community, right?
Right, right.
Okay. Now it may come across, and I think a lot of my students when they're starting their career, especially in this part two of their masters, right? They're starting to visualize, okay, how are they going to be as a psychologist? And a lot of the time there is this anxiety or uncertainty about what if I don't know how to handle a case?
Yeah.
What if I make errors,
Hmm.
right? Uh, how do I handle these situations? Am I trained enough? And I think
Right.
when we teach, right, I have noticed that they have this impression of people who are coming from the community and who are basically experienced, right? We consider them to be experienced psychotherapists. They have this impression that, oh, you must be handling everything well, and uh, by now, or how did you know, right? That where did you get that confidence about
Yeah.
being a
Yeah.
psychotherapist, right? So I think I'm going to ask you a few questions that my students ask. One of them being,
Yeah.
do you meet errors? If you do, how do you handle
No, I don't. I never make errors. I'm perfect. Well, that's ridiculous, isn't it? So obviously I make errors, and I hope all of us continue to make errors because, I mean, like we say, right, in therapy, mistakes are feedback. right? So where are you going to get feedback from if you're not making errors and then working on correcting them, right? Hopefully, I make new errors now, and I don't
Mhm.
make the same errors that I made, let's say, 10 years back. So I'm learning from my errors and making new mistakes. Also, because our work is dynamic.
Hmm.
There is, I mean, I could be trained and experienced at the highest level, and that's important.
Hmm.
But after that, when I'm in front of the client, right, there are going to be many moving pieces in that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
In every new session, even with the same client, and of course, with different clients,
Hmm.
many moving pieces. And so, which means we are vulnerable to making errors because you can't possibly have everything pre planned and controlled. And
Hmm.
that can be the goal. In fact, that's very detrimental to therapy because as a therapist,
Hmm.
I am more concerned with my perfect performance,
Yeah.
and by the virtue of that fact, less concerned with what's happening with the client.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So, in fact, I encourage people to make errors, and in fact, what's helped me is because I've had people that I could learn from. That's why I said right in the beginning that that's always got to be the milestone. That can you meet the right teacher who's going to guide you, direct.
Hmm.
So learning from people, from their books, from attending their trainings, etc., from personal supervision, then has helped me correct those errors. So for sure, I mean, if I have time to mention just one sort of an
So,
error,
yeah, please go ahead.
sort of a block, let's say it's not one
Mhm. Mhm.
block of mistakes
Right. Yeah.
as a trainer as well as a therapist, and I think I made that some years back. I'd like to think that I'm correcting it now, is to sort of be more occupied with what you have to offer
Mhm.
and therefore not meet your client or student at the
Mhm.
place of what they actually want from you.
Mhm. Mhm.
You see
Right.
what I mean? They can be two different things. So, for example, I
Yeah.
am an practitioner and I could be greatly
Mhm.
excited about offering REBT because I really believe it works and I
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
Um, but if I lose sight of what is it that they want from therapy, and
Mhm.
if I don't understand that well enough, and if I don't meet them at the point of their need,
Right. Right.
then no matter how good I am at what I do, and no matter how efficient I am, as I often like to say, I won't be effective for the client. And I think the same for with students.
Mhm.
I'm going to
Mhm.
teach them what I think helps them,
Yeah. Yeah.
but if I don't meet them at the place of what they where they are, and they may
Mhm.
not be where I want them to be, but if I don't make the effort to meet them where they are, that's a serious
Mhm.
error. We have to be all mindful of it and then work on correcting it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. So what I'm hearing you say is one, it would be unrealistic to expect that we won't meet errors, since therapy in itself is very dynamic and there are multiple factors. So even if you know everything that you know,
Hmm.
there's still going to be a chance of some things that you don't know or some things that we need to modify maybe within the session. And I think I'm glad that you brought up something that you're struggling with. I think that makes it more relatable for us
Yeah.
to kind of say, yes, this can happen. It can happen at the beginning of your career, and I think it can happen even, after years of experience.
Sure.
Yeah. And it would be detrimental, as you said, in case we expect that it doesn't happen. So allowing that to be there, I think, is your way of
Yeah.
working with
And then accessing help. I want to,
it.
tell all these young
Right.
students that you've got to find people. There are people in the field.
Correct.
There's you for now, just in this session. There's
Hmm.
me,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that I mean, we may not have all the answers, and we don't have all the answers, but we're willing to help people with whatever we
Hmm.
know. Help them find out. So people have to access help. You make errors,
Hmm.
access help, go for supervision, talk to a teacher, find a community that's going to help you to correct those errors. That's the way to move forward.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So the following with that, I think, as you said, that there are trainers, supervisors, teachers available, and we are there to kind of provide that kind of opportunity to come and ask. I think one of the questions that I also hear very frequently is, Do you have difficulty at times dealing with certain kinds of clients or certain populations? You may struggle with at times with empathizing with them or unconditionally accepting them at times because we teach these as core conditions, right? And sometimes students struggle and say, "Oh, how do I practice that in so and so case?" Right? Because either it's a very severe case or somebody has done really, really harmful things,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Um, how do you struggle with that and how you handle that?
Uh, okay, so, well, one is when uh, the problem is a challenging, difficult, complex problem to deal with. Like you mentioned, somebody with suicidal ideation, etc.
Hmm. Mhm.
And so the answer then in that sense is also complex because then there are sort of multiple layers to it. But
Mhm.
the part of your question that I'd like to address is, sometimes do you find it on a personal level difficult to
Mhm.
work with certain kind of clients?
Mhm.
And that's going to happen, isn't it? I mean, look, with difficult problems, you can have training and you can have help and you can, there's so much resource material you can access and learn and you can do better. But these personal challenges where the problem presented is a personal challenge for you, or you're not able to fully empathize with the client, or you find yourself, we're humans, right? So you find yourself maybe becoming judgmental about the client, and you've got to
Mhm.
overcome that if you're going to help them, right? Because you help them with that kind of judgment. So that kind of situation, I think, can become tricky. Like, two quick examples that come to my mind, and I won't go into a lot of detail, we have limited time, but just to kind of talk about the points that I just made. One is,
Right.
which I may have even spoken with you. This was an old client because where, he was a guy in his 40s who had a very chauvinistic attitude towards his wife and
Mhm.
towards the institution of marriage in general. So his
Mhm.
idea was that he could control her and suppress her, and his behaviors were all very aggressive towards her in terms of not physical violence, but in every other way trying to control her,
Mhm.
and believed that that was the right thing to do, that that was the role of a wife. Right now,
Mhm.
with anger issues.
Right.
And so this is an example of this part of him, the chauvinism. I found it very difficult to deal with because on a personal level, like, I wouldn't be friends with someone like that, right? You know what I mean? So I found it very difficult to get over the judgment of him in my mind.
Yeah.
But I was able to still
Mhm.
parallel help him with his anger problems because he was a voluntary client and he was willing to work on his anger for whatever
Mhm.
reason.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I was able to give him help with that.
Right.
So what that did obviously is, though his chauvinistic attitude didn't change drastically, his angry behavior towards the wife
Right.
changed.
It's
So she got some interim relief at least. So I mean, what I'm saying is, so that's a bit tricky, but you can't lose sight of what you can do for them
hmm.
when you're
Right.
struggling with something that seems like a more deep rooted problem. Do you see what
Yeah.
I mean?
Makes
At
sense.
other
Yeah.
times, in fact, I have sometimes even, if there is a lot of sort of incongruence, then I may be open with them and refer them to another therapist.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
I think that beyond a point. So there's another example of a client recently where there are these parents, they've just found out that their daughter is gay. She's in her 20s. She's
Hmm.
in, but they found out that she's gay and they are not being able to accept it. But they keep coming to therapy to, I mean, saying that they want to accept it, but
Right.
they don't want to accept it, and then what they expect of the therapist is, can you get my daughter to change her mind?
Hmm. Right. True. True. Very good.
I
Yeah.
mean, firstly, I mean, because I don't agree with them ideologically, i don't I don't resonate with their sort of bias against
Hmm.
homosexuality.
Hmm. Hmm.
And second,
Hmm.
that's just not the kind of help that I, as a therapist, I'm going to offer. So then I mean, sometimes I did some work with them, but at one point I had to take a stand and say, look, I don't think anything's coming out of this. And beyond this, I will not be able to help you. And so sometimes you refer them. But that's important
Mm,
because if you continue regardless,
mm, right,
then it's likely to be harmful to you
right,
and the
right. Makes sense. Makes
yeah.
sense. So I'm going to highlight a few things that you said. And I think as the discussion is going forward, there are going to be people who are going to think about their own questions.
Yeah.
So we will be giving them time, I think, at the end of the interview. So
Sure.
in case anybody has any question, please make note of it. We'll give you the time, and then at that particular time, we'll address all the questions together. Unfortunately, because of the time, we can't do it like an open discussion at this point, right? Having said that, I want to summarize some things. I think what you're saying is then train yourself first, right, to deal with certain difficult populations. Refer them in case you have difficulty, and also mainly work on yourself if you struggle to maintain that acceptance and the empathy for your client. But there's still going to be struggles
There
at
are.
times,
For sure.
right?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I'm going to be a little greedy. Okay. I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Um, I is there any are there any recommendation or key points that you use by yourself to build an effective or a therapeutic relationship? Because I think what we get like these four conditions, a set of things that we do to build
Yeah.
from PCD, right? So we
Yeah.
get these four conditions to build the rapport and let's say the therapeutic working alliance with the client. And
Mm-hmm.
since you come from REBT background, right? Really curious to hear if there's anything that you follow for yourself and how do you do that?
So I mean, since you mentioned the REBT, that I think is, I mean, the three fundamental tenets in REBT philosophy are flexibility, acceptance, and active tolerance. And I find that they're very helpful for me as a therapist while developing this relationship with the client.
Hmm.
Hold a flexible attitude towards the process, towards the relationship, towards the non-linearity of the process. It's going to go
Mhm.
back and forth. You can have the most sort of effective research back tool, and we do. REBT is a great tool. Even then,
Mhm.
it's not always going to move in a progressive direction linearly. It's going to go back and forth. So flexibility towards that, acceptance of the client, which is what I touched upon a little bit. The idea that, okay, I don't like this person's chauvinistic attitude, but I can accept that they can be fallible enough to have that attitude, right? That kind of acceptance towards the client is work, but it's well worth it in developing the relationship. And then active tolerance towards the fallibility of the process,
Hmm.
right, towards the dynamism, like I said, that there are
Mhm.
going to be moving pieces, that I will always not know answers, that certain things that I think are helpful are not helping this client, or you know what I mean. So I
Yeah.
sort of allow all of that to happen, the messiness of it is messy and chaotic, therapy.
Hmm.
But any process of change is that, then
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
going to be all very neatly folded, right, ironed out kind of a process. It's not going to be like that. So I find that over the years, the more that I have allowed that to happen, you know
Mhm.
my favorite word, and many of my students know, and I don't have a word for it in English. It's a Hindi word called tehra. So that word is really helpful, I feel, in forming that sort of a sustainable relationship with the client. And like I said before, to meet them where they are, to understand where they are. Let's not
Hmm.
rush. Let's not quickly try to sort of achieve a goal that we think is very helpful for them.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So all
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
is that's helped.
That's a great insight because that's a great learning I think for me as well because as you're saying it as itself I think I realized it oh my god in
Right.
this process right now itself I think that was really helpful. Uh, Great points. Okay, now I want to go a little bit towards the training side because I think we have been having this discussion that the training that we receive at the master's level or in general in psychotherapy uh, has its gaps, right?
Mm.
And we have been discussing about that and kind of discussing as to How is it going right now? So,
Mhm.
firstly, I want to start with do you have any recommendations and what are your views about the current psychotherapy training and education that's there available for us?
Hmm. Well, that's a broad level question. I'll quickly answer that, but I want to address that question more on an individual student level. On the broad level, I'm saying because maybe there are many factors out of our control at that level right now, but even at that level, I feel like we're trying to pack too much in,
Hmm.
like, especially if I speak about the postgraduate courses,
Right,
trying to pack too much in those 2 years.
right.
The way courses are designed is it's almost like we believe that the more I know, the better.
Hmm.
That's not
Right.
always the case. And I mean, I found that in my practice that it's not
Hmm.
but how well you know it, the depth of
Right,
it, the
correct.
the breadth
Right.
of it. So I feel like if we sort of packed in less, but
Yeah,
gave everything more time, more practice,
right.
right, more scope for all of this fallibility that we've been talking, making errors,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing. Like, that most of these students, and even in my experience, everyone's talking about how can we get hands-on experience, how can we know what's actually practically happening, right?
Right.
So I mean, if we can find a way to give them that too,
Hmm.
education process,
Right.
while they're finishing their degrees, that would be
Yeah.
great. As of now, that's not happening. And therefore, coming to an individual level, I want to say to these students, and I was saying it to another group recently, is that therefore our training cannot at this point end with the MA.
Yeah.
I
Good.
think right from my times when I'm talking about the first REBT training that I did, which was a major
Hmm.
milestone,
Hmm.
your times, Trupti, which was about, about 10, 12 years back
Yeah.
when you started getting yourself
Right.
trained, even
Yeah.
now, this
Hmm.
has the fact that we need to invest in training beyond the postgraduate degree. And this is something that I heard yesterday from someone. I want to say this from an education training point of view here, that that apparently, and this is interesting, they say that a wise man once said that if I want to cut a tree in 6 hours, I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe. Do you see what I mean? Now, the
Yes.
training that we give ourselves is the sharpening of the axe. Have you sharpened your axe enough?
Hmm.
And if
Right.
you haven't, and
Yeah.
you're eager to cut the tree quickly to reach your goal,
Hmm.
to have this
Hmm.
practice,
Right.
that's not, going to help because, well, you don't have the tools required to get the task done. So I feel
Right.
like training is that sharpening of the axe. So let
Hmm.
it take longer. Let
Yeah.
it, invest more time, invest more money if required,
Hmm.
but the way it pays off over the rest of your career
Hmm.
will prove to be worth it.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And on that subject, I think as you're saying, sharpening the knife or the axe, what do we have available? So I would like to ask you, since InViewer has been, instrumental in conducting these trainings and workshops and, opportunities that are there. I know that you have been involved in that a lot. Can we hear a little bit about what InViewer has on offer right now,
Hmm.
within
Well,
this?
so we are, as the name says, Center for REBT. So we've been committed to REBT and dissemination of REBT since the time that I started it, and we continue to be. So our our main sort of chunk of work is training in REBT, right? And the
Hmm.
training happens. I mean, I'm going to explain this very quickly because you guys can avail of this information on our website or even after this session. But I'm just saying that the reason that it happens like this is that we've brought that international training to India that we spoke about. Albert Ellis Institute's international certification, right? And that's not only because we care about international certification, we do care about it, but that's not the only reason. The only reason is because the quality of that international training is something that we have all benefited from. I have when I did that training. And I'd like
Hmm.
to believe that, my senior students like you, Trupti, have benefited. And then they continue to do so. We conduct this training every year,
Hmm.
and that can become a game changer in the sense of the amount of learning that it gives you, the perspective that it gives you, and the fact that you're being trained by, on that training, of course, as you know, we have Professor Windy Dryden. So you're being trained by someone who's been practicing since before we were born and has written over 270 books, right? In any curriculum of REBT, right? The suggested reading that you're going to have is 90% are his books. So to have a person like that train you is can elevate your level of training to another level. So that's the reason that we brought that training. And of course, that training is for someone who is invested in REBT and would like to specialize in REBT and, then build their career on it like we have. And I strongly encourage that training for anyone like that. But we also do what we call the intensive training, which is a certification by in vivo. Again, the whole training is conducted by me since I am a certified trainer and supervisor of the AEI. But that's a training for someone who wants to get introduced to REBT, but not just introduced in like a 3-hour workshop kind of way,
Hmm.
but enough to start practicing it. So, I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is that our goal, our vision as in vivo, one of the things that's important to us is to bridge that gap that I spoke about earlier. That how do you start practicing? You may know
Hmm.
things or a bunch of things, but how do you start practicing? So, in our trainings, we're very mindful of giving them that practice, right? Giving them that hand holding, teaching them through supervision of about what they're doing, not so they're practicing what they're learning, that kind of stuff, right? So that after they finish the training, they should be able to start practicing REBT. They will make mistakes, but they can have help. We shouldn't stop them from starting to practice, right? As long as they
Hmm.
have qualification. So, I mean, those are the main trainings that we do. But I just like to elaborate that besides the trainings now, we've seen that there is also a gap where, like, some people are saying, I don't yet know if I want to get trained in a specific therapy. I haven't made up my mind. So,
Hmm.
some hand holding generally, that kind
Hmm.
of also helps me understand what I like, what I don't like.
Hmm. Hmm.
Help me make up my mind that this is where I want to go. This is what I like. So,
Right.
from point of view, also now we're offering what we are calling the mentoring,
Hmm.
a more broader 3-month full time interaction, offline, in person interaction with people, where they can sort of observe what we're doing in person and then also get active learning in
Hmm.
right from again going to the core skills in practice,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Or case discussions, actually talking about cases and how they can be conceptualized, right? Listening to recordings of therapists at the center and then learn from,
Hmm.
have a rich
Hmm.
discussion. So everything that's kind of about how to do the doing, you know what I mean? Like I might know, but how to translate it. So that's the kind of work that uh, we are more and more committed towards. So not just
Hmm.
REBT training then, but to kind of
Right.
also, that's what I meant by we want to meet students where they are. We
Hmm.
don't want to say, okay, this is what we have to offer, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
We do want to meet them where they are.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that. I think, as you brought it up, I would say this again, that just like for you, I think for me as well, the training that I did or the exposure that I got through these trainings, and the feedback that I received from the trainers, I think was the highlight for me to build that career, right? So all of these programs seem like, and I want to point this out as well, is that the association that I have with InVivo is also with that mindset that you have done things ethically over the period of time. So I know that if you're conducting a training, it's going to be you training the student, right?
Yes.
If you're going to give them the benefit of the training, then you're going to pay attention to not just the didactic or the theoretical conceptual learning, but also to the practical aspect of things. And my students know that because I kind of say, go to the MBA if you want to train yourself in the longer run for the REBT course. One of the things that I want to say is that I have taken a leaf out of your book as well, and I think this is your training that is there. So I'm really thinking that we should encourage more people to go for these kind of training. And Inspira has also been involved in this kind of work, right? So we have been involved in the psychotherapy part of things. This program in itself, I think we kind of thought about because we thought that let's bring the speakers or the experts in the field to meet, budding psychologists, professionals, students, and then give them the benefit of learning directly from professionals. I think this is one of the attempts that we're doing right now to do that. So we have more such programs and more interviews coming in this series. And for those of you who joined a little later, we will be sending out few details about what programs ma'am has discussed right now. Uh, and we would also like to hear from you as your feedback for today's session. So you might receive a form, and then we would really like you to fill that in to give a suggestion. Don't leave yet. So we do have hopefully we do have few questions that we can address. If not, then I do have one or two questions that I want to ask and details.
Till people are asking questions, I'd like to respond to what you said, Trupti. So these kind of initiatives, this series that you've started, where you are, where people are going to come who've been practicing in the field for a while, and new students, budding therapists get exposure to this. This kind of, and I know this for sure because we are at In Vivo interested in it. You are, and I'm hoping more people are. This is kind of the community building that we're all, and I want new students to know this. So there is a whole community where, yes, of course, you can do trainings that are, you can pay for them and do them, etc. But there's also a whole host of access to other resources, right?
Hmm.
Well, and we have a community group, you have a community group, and students can be a part of this. They can get access to conversations between people who are practicing in the field, their challenge, or
Right.
practice sort of exercises on that community, or blogs that are written by people. So
Right. Right.
there can be access to so much of this learning
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, if you're part of the community.
Yes.
So that's the other thing that In Vivo is also very committed to now, that can we form a network of give and take amongst various practitioners in the community, so that we're sort of helping budding psychologists as well to build their careers. So this whole notion about there isn't money in this profession and what can
Hmm.
but you've got to
Right.
charge your clients less because
Hmm. Hmm.
they don't pay. All of that is already changing, and we can play a role
Hmm.
in changing that. If I get myself trained, if I invest in a good level of training and I get myself trained at that level, why
Hmm.
can't I give that kind of fees to my clients and justify it because they're going to get that kind of service? And
Hmm.
that's really, clients do appreciate that. So
Hmm. Hmm.
encouraging people here in this session also to reach out and join these
Hmm.
communities,
Right.
find out what's going on, uh,
Hmm.
get access to this material. That's, I think, a great way to sort of
Yeah.
build
Yeah.
your career,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought it up because I think the reason why we are able to collaborate like this is because there is that opportunity that you're also offering. So we're kind of coming together to work with this.
Yeah.
One question that I was thinking, in case, if I can go ahead with the time that we have. Um, we have been discussing, let's do something in addition to just providing for trainings and workshops that we do. I think, as you said, we provide resources. And we have conducted a conference previously, and we have conducted, events where people can come in, understand, get their resources, get their learning, and connect in this community, right?
Oh,
What's there in the future for India? Are there any,
yeah.
things that you're thinking about? What's your,
Yeah.
vision for it?
So, like I said, this is in fact a very important part of our vision, that we want REBT dissemination, of course,
Mhm.
right? We want more and more people in the country to have access to good training in REBT, but not just training, but to also sort of be able to, you know, uh, uh, take it forward in their
Right.
own way, right? That
Yeah.
that more and more people are talking about it, using it, practicing it, etc. So that's
Mhm. Mhm.
practice in Mumbai, but we want to reach out to other places in the country and sort of, make it broader in its reach. But the second thing, which is an important part of our vision, is the community thing.
Mhm.
Want to build a strong community that can address some of the problems that these new psychologists, new budding psychologists could have, right? To help them find that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Or then if we don't have answers right now, then to think about how can we have answers to some of these problems, right?
Yeah.
So that they are better set up to have a full-fledged
Mm. Right.
in psychology, and that we don't keep looking at it as this part-time, less paid kind of profession where there isn't
Yeah.
much. We
Yeah.
really need to change that narrative for sure. So we are committed to that, and to building that community. More conferences in the future, maybe, right? Yes,
Yes. I'm
def-
keeping my fingers crossed right now.
yes.
Definitely. And I think we'll hopefully also get into the research aspect of the REBT, and then, we can do that work as well.
Oh,
Looking forward to collaborating on all of this, by the way. Really, really interested in, looking forward to what you have in the future. Having said this, I think one of the things that I wanted to mention from what you said is a lot of the time people feel that REBT is sort of like I don't think they verbalize it completely. But they think about REBT community as, this cult that we are trying to convert into, and we're
yes,
not doing that. I think what we're trying to get towards is that it's
yeah,
an effective tool that we would like people to know about, I think, whether it be the general population, clients, and professionals. And we are offering that. So
yeah,
in case, that's something that they can pick up and then they can use even in small amounts in their life. I think we know that that will be helpful for them.
yeah. And I mean, just to respond to that, if this can be helpful to the group, that in REBT, we advocate what we call the both and approach and not the either or approach, right? So, which means we don't look at it as you either practice REBT or you don't. And there are only two ways of doing it, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
you are wrong if you don't, and you're right
Right.
if you do,
Correct.
right? Don't
Yeah.
look at it like that at all. You
Yeah.
can both be highly specialized in REBT
Mm-hmm.
and also be interested
Right.
in other forms of therapy or other
Right.
ways of working. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
look at it as either this or that. There is a
Right.
lot of scope for, like a multimodal approach for sure.
True. True.
Right?
True. And
And
I think and I think we have also spoken a little bit about, as we also practice IDPD, we have been trying to, I think, bring in from other modalities also. I think for both of us, REBT has remained as the foundation of what we practice. But we do, and we are open to kind of using tools and strategies from other places that would complement what we practice, I
sure,
think.
that's the way to go
So
forward. Yeah.
correct. And I think I'm glad that you brought that, because that approach, I think, has helped me as well. So that would be helpful for my students as well. Okay. Just give